Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends and subscribers, in this edition of Issues of Contemporary Politics, I am going to talk about three visions for the future of Europe. And that is expressed in recent pronouncements by Chancellor of Germany, Merz, President of Russia, Putin, and President of Ukraine, Zelensky. In the last couple of weeks, they made very significant announcements and speeches which defined their understanding of where things are going and what is going to be the future of Europe. I start with the actions rather than words of President Putin that set this whole atmosphere in which we're now witnessing the unfolding of these processes. Putin has been accused of doing nothing, of red lines being crossed that Russia set and no response following. The drones of Ukraine made in Germany are flying over Russia and hitting targets in Tuapse, in the oil refineries in Ust-Luga, reaching all the way to Urals, and supposedly Putin does nothing. At least that's what some of the Russian observers say. Well, he has. He has done at least something, and which is on the economic front. As of May 1st, the flow of Kazakhstan oil to Germany stops. How significant is it? What exactly are we talking about? So here's some data. The refinery in the town of Schwedt in Germany processed up to 12 million tons of oil per year, which represents 90% of the gasoline and diesel and fuel for the Berlin and Brandenburg province in Germany. The Kazakh oil in that pipeline that went through Belarus to Germany represents 20% of the supply. So when 20% is cut, this is not catastrophic. This is not totally devastating, but it's serious. Moreover, it's a serious blow in a sense that the flow of oil from the Strait of Hormuz is blocked for the moment, or most of it, and that means that German industry will find itself in trouble. Now, of course, the German government says, no problem, we can buy it here, we can do it there, we can import more oil from elsewhere. There isn't much elsewhere. The Norwegian oil is at the capacity, and with no oil coming from the Middle East, it's possible to get only more expensive American oil, and even that is not endless supply. So basically, Germany will face a serious energy crunch. And that is on top of its declining industry over the last few years. The Economic Institute, the German Federation of Industries, BDE, or BDI in English, expects a stagnation in Germany in 2026, the growth of 0.6%. The industrial sector lost 160,000 jobs in 2025, and the rising number of closures and companies relocating from Germany is growing. The German chemicals, BASF, famous plant, and steel and glass and aluminum, and the automobile industry is in decline for the 4 years in a row. So this is the reality, and Russian oil does play an important role in the capacity of Germany to stay an industrial might. Before I talk about the political fallout in Germany from this move, let me just say that the Kazakhstan oil is simply relocating. It is not a blow against Kazakhstan. of the 260 tons total that Kazakhstan sent in this direction, 100,000 tons will go to the Russian port of Ust-Luga, which is in the Baltic Sea, and 160,000 tons will go to the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk to be exported by tankers to a variety of destinations. In other words, the economic effect will not be negative for Kazakhstan. So this cut of oil supply is not critical but significant for German industry, and it obviously is a signal to Germany and to von der Leyen, the European Union, that Putin repeated several times in a row. You don't want our oil, that's just fine. You want to phase it out, that's just fine. We have other markets we can send it to, and as Putin put it, to more reliable partners. Now, the message that Merz was saying in recent weeks ignores these difficulties completely, as if nothing is happening. And he's been saying lately that Germany is going to rebuild its army to be the strongest in Europe. And the target is 480,000, almost 500,000 troops. Now, how is that going to be done in the current demographic situation in Germany is not clear. How that could be done when Germany is relocating and collapsing by 20% since 2022, this is not clear, but this is what Merz is saying. Germany is going to remilitarize, is going to build tanks instead of cars. Volkswagen is going to build tanks. That is sounds strange. What tanks? Who is going to drive these tanks? Are they going to try to drive those tanks to Stalingrad again? It just doesn't make any sense. This whole militarization is as if it's from yesterday's, or better to say, not 21st century, but 20th, and 100 years too late. In any case, this is what he says, and this is what the picture of the future of Germany is, according to Merz. Germany as the mightiest military power in Europe. Now, of course, it's quite interesting to see what reaction that may cause of Germany's neighbors, such as France or Poland or Britain. I don't think they would appreciate a German army to be the strongest in the world or in Europe facing confrontation with Russia. Now, the second message that Merz made in a couple of days ago concerns Zelensky and the war in Ukraine. And it is quite a departure from the totally hostile message of Madame von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas. The message is that Zelensky should abandon territory that is already lost and instead conduct a referendum selling this withdrawal to the Ukrainian public as a price to pay for membership in the European Union. So this is, again, Merz's vision of Europe. Germany becoming a centerpiece of European security. Ukraine plays its role and becomes a kind of a general governorship of the new Reich, as it was in 1942, when Germany occupied all of Ukraine, pretty much. This is the historical vision. Germany, number one, leading Europe, and Ukraine is a part of it. by just sacrificing Donbass, which actually, strictly speaking, is not Ukraine, but Novorossiya. Okay, so this is what Merz proposes. Now, let me turn to the political fallout in Germany from the shutting down of the pipeline and basically the militaristic verbiage, rhetoric of Merz. And that has to do with the opposition party of Alternative for Germany, which is in German AfD, and that rose to its popularity of 28 or 30%, which for the first time is equal or higher than the rating of the CDU, the Christian Democrats. For the first time in post-war German history, CDU is not number one and is replaced by AfD. Now, this party has been labeled all kinds of things, right-wing, neo-Nazi, all this total nonsense, because this is what it says in its manifesto released about mid-April 2026 in connection with the local elections in Saxony. The AfD explicitly criticized German government's approach and stated, and I quote, "The current anti-Russian policies of the establishment and the political parties, however, are not in Germany's best interest. They are dividing Europe." The manifesto called for lifting sanctions on Russia, especially energy sanctions, improving and normalizing relations with the Russian Federation, including introduction of free Russian language study in school. That's an interesting one. Immediate lifting of economic sanctions against Russia, repair and reactivation of the Nord Stream pipeline to resume cheap energy from Russia, cheap energy imports, which are vital, it says, for German industry. Normalization of political and economic relations with Russia, arguing that Russia has historically been a reliable partner of Germany. Opposition to further military aid and military involvement in Ukraine conflict. The AfD favors diplomatic solution and realistic peace that would take Russian security into account. Promotion of the multipolar world and stronger cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union, which is Russia-led economic union. So they put it in terms of Kooperation statt Konfrontation, which is in English cooperation instead of confrontation. Now, this is, of course, a totally different vision of Germany, a totally different vision of Germany's role in Europe, which is very consistent, actually, what the Greens used to be in the 1980s and in the 1970s, and the policies of Willy Brandt that had been abandoned. This is not anywhere like right-wing, as they call it. These are the policies of Ostpolitik of the second half of the 20th century, which have been forgotten by neo-militarist and confrontational approach, not to call them neo-Nazi or right-wing, indeed, that of Ms. von der Leyen and others. So these are the trends of Germany that are now unfolding. I'll come back to it in a moment with the context in Europe, but let me just say a couple of words about what President Zelensky has been saying. He had a speech on the anniversary of Chernobyl disaster a few days ago, and he spoke about Ukraine being the bulwark against Russian aggression. and he framed Ukraine as a centerpiece of new architecture of European security. With its biggest army, Ukraine features itself as the main armed force that would confront Russia. This is something, of course, typical for Zelensky. He loves the limelight. He wants to be in the center of events. And of course, Ukraine is going to be this kind of a porcupine, as von der Leyen put it. Um, Now, of course, the reality that he faces is quite different. The 90 billion that he's supposed to get, in fact, only 20 or 30 he will actually receive. The rest of it would go to the arms manufacturers in Europe that are producing drones and other kind of hardware for him. At this moment, Ukraine has already a 20 billion deficit for this current 2026 year. And the 30 billion it would get would barely cover the necessary expenses until the fall. So in other words, it's not that he has everything lined up. He has the survival bare minimum for the next few months. And what happens afterwards is unknown, and there's no money for it. And he has already begun begging for more money from the European Union. But the trends are such that Europe will not be able to sustain this endless billions going into the black hole that is called Zelensky's Ukraine. He has now no money, no soldiers, and widening nationwide protest against forced mobilization, with pictures coming daily of men being beaten up, seized on the streets, and thrown into the buses to be mobilized. Now, and despite all this, Zelensky rejected publicly Merz's approach of surrendering Donbass, a territory that is already lost, that has already joined the Russian Federation, and there is no way it could count on getting it back, either by force or by diplomatic means. So, this is what Zelensky has been doing, living in a kind of a fantasy world, but that's what he prefers to do. Now, let me get back to Putin and his vision. Obviously, Russia cannot accept a porcupine, armed to the teeth Ukraine. This is even more important than the territory. Russia cannot accept Ukraine moving to NATO or to the European Union, which is now the same thing. This is one of the root causes of the war, as Putin put it. So Russia cannot accept Ukraine retaining a big army and being armed by revived militarist Germany. So all that is unacceptable. So then what then is Putin counting on? And this is the heart of the matter of the trends that we're discussing. Putin, I think, my view is that he still hopes to make a deal with Europe, but not the kind of Europe led by von der Leyen and Callas and Merz and Macron. He hopes that there are net new trends in Europe that are shaping the continent. And the new trends is AfD, that is gaining more and more and can, in fact, win in the next national elections in Germany. It also, there's a Rassemblée Nationale in France, Marine Le Pen's party, that also has a pretty good chances of winning next year's presidential elections in France. And its program is similar. It is France first, but it is also in favor of restoring normal relations with Russia. And of course, the recent unexpected win of the Russia-friendly government in Bulgaria, but by a landslide, over 50%, is a signal to von der Leyen that European politics trends are going not in the direction of confrontation, but in the direction of cooperation. The Hungarian elections and the Slovakia government, as well as the suppressed elections in Romania, all of these people, all of these leaders are moving in the direction of restoring normal relations with Russia. Not far from this is Salvini in Italy, and Spain and Southern Europe in general. In other words, my view is that Putin is still hoping very much that the new trends in Europe will translate in a reassessment of its policies to Russia and would resume normal relations once the war is over. So what is to expect is a Russian offensive this summer, and then in the long term, Putin's view of Europe is new cooperation and normal neighborly relations with Russia. I stop with this, my dear friends, and I invite you to continue to do your comments and to consider listening to my other playlists on European history, on Russian history, on Soviet history, on Lenin and Stalin. And of course, I invite you to read my book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin. Goodbye.